All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Common Lisp Study Group. I'm your host, Ron Baden with Atlanta Functional Programming. Today, we're going to be talking about and continuing our discussion with our flac demo application. If you recall, the flac metadata demo that we done a couple of weeks ago was an application that was reading in the metadata of a flac file, which is an audio file that is adhering to the flac specification has specified by the following address, which is, I'm going to go ahead and post this on here just for folks to actually follow through. It is, there it is. I was looking for it in my browser tabs. It's at this following address. This specification, we went through and actually wrote up a various set of metadata blocks as defined by that specification. And we'll do a quick review of those metadata blocks and then add some error handling. And I will start writing a UI today, hopefully on top of this. So just to complete what we have so far as a complete a unique application. For the user interface, I'm going to be leveraging the LTK library that we've discussed in past episodes, which is a very simple library for writing user interfaces inside Common Lisp that leverages the TK or TIC library that's part of the TICL language that most people are probably familiar with. That's part of the Linux operating system. To begin with, I'm going to first pull up our buffer, our data structures that we've defined thus far, and loading it into our image. So just give me a second. Before I begin, can everyone see my screen on the stream right now on the Hangouts?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font size here. Go ahead and shrink this down a little. And maybe bring this down so I can have two buffers going here. And metadata. Yeah. Okay. So to reiterate what we have thus far, let me first actually go ahead and load this guy. To reiterate, while this is loading, what we have thus far is we've defined a series of metadata blocks as defined by the flac specification. To review what the flac specification metadata format says is each flac file will contain a mandatory metadata block that represents the stream info of that file. And 0 or more metadata blocks that represents various aspects of that file, whether it has the application, whether it is a seek table, which is representing the potential places where you can actually seek throughout the actual audio stream, the Vorbis comment, which is additional information from ogvorbis that has been injected into the flac metadata itself. A cue sheet, which unfortunately, I apologize, I cannot find a good example of this, but normally a cue sheet is like a playlist that's inside of a flac file. A lot of times, folks who have a Q sheet in their flac file, they're normally giving you a flac file that represents an entire album. And additional things like if it is in this case an entire album, oftentimes a lot of albums have cover art and so forth, and so um, FLAC also provides a block, a metadata block that allows you to put in those cover arts, those pictures and stuff that inside the FLAC file itself. So this way, your FLAC player can actually go in and read in all that information through a single file, rather than having to open up multiple files in order to actually display the appropriate things that what is the viewer is actually listening to. In order to facilitate us and make it easier for us to actually define these metadata blocks, we've defined a class called the metadata block and the metadata header. And if you can see here, the metadata header's purpose is keeping track of whether or not it is the last metadata block in this list. It's actually a linked list of metadata blocks. Whether or not it is what type of block it is, and the length of the actual block. We've also defined a simple function that uses a case statement that takes in the block type of the metadata block from the metadata header, and it goes ahead and based on the appropriate number returns us whether or not it's a stream info, padding, application, and so forth. Also, you may, for folks just joining in and haven't seen our previous episodes, we keep track of what block we're currently parsing by using a special variable, the metadata block, the star metadata block star. For folks who are, just to reiterate, who are just trying to learn in on Common Lisp while you're doing this project, remember special variables have this visual indicator of earmuffs that will allow you to know whether or not something is a special variable. We also created two functions. One function goes ahead and parses a specific metadata block that's been actually set in this let star binding. What this does is it creates a new instance of this metadata block in the global metadata block, and then when we parse the actual file, it calls this metadata block, this parse metadata function that we defined earlier, that we're defining right now, to actually go in and grab the information for that given metadata block. So if you can see right here, we have this metadata block data function here in this setup. And for folks on this line, line 33, that gives a call to parse metadata that takes in the block type and actually parses the appropriate metadata. Parse metadata itself, as you can see later on in this file, is a generic function that is specialized by the given metadata block type that we're actually trying to parse, and each individual one is defined accordingly, and we go ahead and parse that information. To make it also easier to define new metadata block data types, we created a macro last time called define metadata block data that takes in the type and the rest of the slots that represent that block data type. And we create a class that represents that metadata block data type. So you could think of stream info in this first example going ahead and defining a class called metadata stream info, and it will go ahead and define all the class members, the instance members, block size, max block size, frame size, and so on in that class definition. Additionally, this macro also defines a method called parse metadata, whose sole purpose is to specialize on the block type that we provided and use that to set up the global metadata block data instance that we're currently parsing so that we keep track of that information and then load it up accordingly. So to see how this macro expansion works, just to give you guys a full picture of what this generation looks like from what we had last time. Taking the stream info example, you could see when we actually expand it, we created a prog statement, which you can see right here in line 47 of the start of the code generation, that defines our class first, the metadata stream info. And what it does is it then defines a method specializer for that instance, that stream info instance, specifically on the block type, as you can see by def method parse metadata. And this guy does nothing more than grabs the slots for the instance of the stream info. As you can see right here, we're actually creating the instance of stream info right here. And then with those slots in mind for that given instance, we then go through and read the individual bytes and set them. So each instance member is getting set by this single setf here. And we return the metadata block structure populated at the end of the function. I'm showing this just mainly as a review for folks who are just joining us in, and also to make sure that we're all on the same page as how these are being defined. Now, you could have very well defined this differently by defining a metadata block data type for each specific one, and then create method specializers yourselves. But this function, this macro, makes it more convenient for us to actually go ahead and generate those in a much cleaner fashion, because as you can see right here, now all you're worried about is defining what instance members are going to be part of this structure and how do we want to set them in a single function call, or what is perceived to be a single function call. With this macro in mind, we went ahead and defined stream info, Vorbis comment, padding, and picture. Unfortunately, and seek table. Unfortunately, the remaining two that's part of this application, that is the application metadata block data type and the QSheet metadata block data type, I have not been able to find a sample flac file through my digging to provide you information as to it existing or not existing. So, with that in mind, today we're going to first write, kind of an example of what should we do with this stuff now that we're able to parse it. We want to be able to view this information in a much cleaner manner, and at least provide you a visual of actually opening up a file and seeing its information. That requires obviously a user interface of some sort. Now the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and use your own UI toolkit of choice that you're familiar with. I chose LTK primarily because, again, I'm fairly familiar with LTK and actually would be able to present to you guys a quick way of actually creating this UI. These are this is going to be a very, very simple user interface, because all it's doing is going to be able to open up a file, and it's going to just view the information of that file the way we kind of expect it to. Once we design how do we want to lay it out in the visual like window itself. Unlike other parts of this, this front end is going to be fairly simple in that all it's going to be is a bunch of labels representing the different members in the metadata block types that we're actually visualizing, and it'll provide a little read-only text box with the information that that is available there. But at the end of this, you will have a complete application that allows you to open up any flac file, and it will run through our parse data, our parse metadata function, which I could show you right here. It's defined in our main here. It's called read flac file. And when we do this, at the end of the day, instead of you having something like this, where you do, let's take the Debussy one. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I have to actually load in the, set the package. Instead of you seeing this instance just being returned on the REPL, you'll actually have a nice little, visual representation that goes through and actually presents the actual internals of the data structure that we just built up until now. Are there questions about the format or what we're going to be attempting today? Okay. So to begin with, we need to first add a simple dependency in order for us to, before we move forward. And like everything else, our dependency will be actually in our ASD, and this is going to be on LTK. So since we added this, we have to reload and then download LTK. Just put Windows on LTK here. So the first thing we want to do is obviously create a window. All right. It's nothing spectacular here that we want to do. And to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and add a function in our main Lisp here. Going back to our main Lisp. Call it range run. I'll just call it main for lack of a better term. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go ahead and create a simple with LTK here. Remember, since we're actually not using the package, we have to specify that we're doing LTK. Let me just make sure that this will give me, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And we're going to go ahead and create a very simple function like we do every time. We're going to end up setting it up with some buttons, mainly to open up a flac file and to open up a flac file. So let's say open flac file button. And this guy is just going to make an instance of a LTK button. Master is currently going to be nil because we're not actually organizing these things into separate grids just yet. We're not actually putting these into multiple things like that. But eventually we will have a little grid layout so that we could display information. This guy will have the text, say open flat file. And right now, we're going to just make sure that everything is set up correctly. So our lambda is going to be just dumping flat file open. Okay. I usually do this just so that I can double check to make sure that I'm able to. I have everything kind of set up before I get started with the meat of the application. So now that we have this let button, we need to go and actually set it up. So we go ahead and do this. We first define our window title. Let's call this that. Now, if you guys recall from our LTK series, the global window that the with LTK creates, it's going to be bound to the special variable star TK star. So we can actually go ahead and set this guy by going to that, and we can specify our window title to be flac metadata viewer, because that's what it is right now. Now we can actually go ahead and pack this button. And packing is the notion of actually setting up the UI in LTK speak. And we define the button, and then let's add some dumb padding here. Let's go ahead and add 500 padding here and 500 padding there. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile this. And oops, typo, not tile, title. There we go. And if we run main here, we'll see that okay. So I just realized for folks, I'm going to have to actually share my entire desktop for me to actually show the execution of this. Give me just 1 minute. Okay. And just load up one thing here before we get started. Continue. So I'm pulling up my notes in a different machine, so just give me this 1 minute here. There we go. All right. So let me go ahead and do this, and so I can read this guy. So if we run this, obviously, you'll see since this is the active buffer, it creates a wish terminal. The wish terminal, what it does is it pops up, creates a window, and it's a socket between itself and our REPL, our common Lisp image, and it will generate our application. So far so good. We have this application that we can actually go ahead and start leveraging. Oh, for some reason I think it's missing my button. Give me just 1 second. Why is this button not showing up? Did I miss something here? Okay. Interesting. It looks like you guys can see my desktop, correct?
Yep.
Okay. I think the problem is I have to share my desktop on the stream too as well. Jeez. Okay. For folks on the stream, we're able to see the window, but I have to switch between the window and our REPL between windows. So I'll go and when we get more and more complete with the application, I'll go ahead and then switch between that and OBS. Right now it's just a very simple window. So my apologies. Unfortunately, it's easier to do this through Hangouts than it is through hooking it through OBS. So apologies if you guys can't see this as we're interactively building bits and pieces of it, but I will periodically show you guys the window as we're completing some of the design. Right now we're debugging something. So let's see here. What did I miss? Did I forget something? Let's see here. This guy is going to be a 10. I did do pack. Maybe I didn't need this. Let me just go ahead and get rid of these paddings for the time being since it is simple. Okay, so it is there. It's just that it's not being pinned. And if we click open flac file, we're going to get the flac file open. So now, obviously, this is doing nothing. We've actually set up our things. Everything seems to be working the way we expect it to. But our open flac file really needs to be literally doing nothing more than opening up a flac file. So what we could do is what I tend to do is I have it. I'll keep track of the current flac file open. This guy is nothing more than keeping track of. This is a singleton you could think of a file object that's currently being loaded. We're not doing multiple buffers here or anything like that, so this is okay. Then here, what we would do is we would, in our open flac file, we need to first open up a dialog. Now, a dialog in flac is somewhat interesting. It is, in LTK is somewhat interesting because it is a special thing that is part of the the LTK library. But right now, why can't I remember what we did when we did menu options before? It was times, tables, button precedence, create menu options. Let's go ahead and see this one. Okay, let's go ahead and see. There is a function that we need to call, but I can't remember what it was to actually do the here we go. So to get a file dialog, we actually use a function called set file dialog. Or get open file, and it will actually grab the file for us. So we do this, and we grab LTK get open file. As you can see, this allows you to specify all sorts of things. We're just going to go ahead and use defaults here, and then dump out, as a dialog box, the file is going to be open. So let's see how this works. And this guy opens up this. Then we hit open file, and as you can see, it opened up a dialog box for our file. And let's pick our flac file itself. And actually, let's change this just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and restrict the file types to being only flac files, right? So let's exit out of this. How do we do that? Well, we just saw that. It's a key type of file types. And we specify all files, because we still want technically that, and this is just actually an associative array, so give me a second here. So I'm going to have to start up smart parens mode, go here, and now we have our all files and flac files. And what I'm going to do is, to make it easier, hopefully, if I remember correctly, these are actually in the order in which you provide them. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and keep, one second, for some reason this buffer keeps on showing up. There we go. Initial name string. This is the initial default path name default is going to be in the home directory for the time being. So we're going to go ahead and run this. There we go. Let's compile. Up. And go to our push terminal. You see open flac file. Load it, and you can see now all of our flac files are now highlighted in Mac. Now on Windows, obviously, if you have this there, you will see an additional dialogue LTK because the native Windows dialog box allows you to drop down and choose different filters here. Mac doesn't give you that, but what it does instead is if you provide a filter has a default filter, all the files that match that filter will automatically get the accessible highlight, which is it will no longer be in gray, it'll be in black. So those are files that you can actually open up with this application. So let's choose one of our flac files. We chose it. You see that the flac file is open. Right now, because this is running in its own thread and it's blocking, we're unable to actually access the special variable. So if we go and exit out of this, though, I think it keeps track of the special variable, and we could see that it's actually populated to that file. So we now have this file. Obviously, once this is done, you'd want to probably not do all this code inside the open dialog box itself. But you could technically do this. You could actually do all the parsing in the open dialog box event handler. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to first clean this up. I'm going to go ahead and make this into a function because it's already kind of getting a little bit unwieldy to read. Having these anonymous functions like this, especially if it becomes multiple lines like this, it might be useful to just go ahead and make this into a function. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll just create a function called open flac file that doesn't take anything. And what it does is it just goes ahead and does what we earlier did, which is do, actually I don't need to do this. I'll just go ahead and grab the entire function here. And let's go to this. And we'll go ahead and map this guy. And we're going to go ahead and do this. And now we have everything kind of like cleaned up in terms of how things are supposed to be defined. Let's go ahead and kill these guys. Okay. This is going to be open flac file. And this is fine. Let's go ahead and choose this again. This time we're going to use a different file to make sure that we're actually, this is all working. So we have this concerto file here that we'll go ahead and grab. We'll exit out of the application, we check, and you'll see that the current file is all set up. So let's go ahead and add, there's a way of actually adding like events to actually connect to different what's the word that I'm thinking of? It allows you to throw an event so that we can actually be listening in an event loop and actually handle it. To do it there is a command function which is we're using right here, and it can be bound to the default event type. And then there's a bind function in LTK that allows you to actually specify what should happen if a particular event occurs. So let me just go and double check here. What is the event that I want to leverage? This should be event is actually thrown once we actually exit out of it. That's the main thing that we need to make sure. This is a TK event for file dialog. What is go ahead and let's see here. Sorry, I'm moving around too many times. All right. Let's make sure it's down. This is going to be it's not going to be button press. It's going to be file open. Let's see if we can make a custom event here. If we can create a custom event, then would be good. And let's see. That's not it. Okay, for now, we'll just go ahead and do this and then simplify this and clean it up once we have everything working, rather than wasting time. Okay, so the main thing that we need to do is we need to first call read flac file just to get our metadata structure. All right, this will return an object that we want to keep track of. To make things a little easier for us, let's go ahead and keep track of the metadata instead. And this is what we're going to be displaying. So we're going to take this guy out. This is no longer needed. What we're going to do is we're going to directly call parse, read flac file on LTK get open file. So this will automatically populate. Oops. Why am I messing up? Read flac file. Just make sure. Yeah. So this will automatically populate our current metadata block when we do the following. Set f current metadata to being this flac file. All right. And see this. Compile it. Let's do this again. Compile it. Everything's good. Go ahead and compile this one more time, and then we can run this. In fact, right now, let me go ahead and close that for the time being. What this does is, this should do everything that we did up until now. So we are able to load this up. Choose this. Flac file has already been parsed. If we exit out of the application and now look at our current metadata, you'll see that it's our flac metadata structure that we've been using just as before, and you'll see all the information that this guy has. Okay. So all's well and good. We actually have dumb UI that doesn't do anything, opens up a file, parses it, loads it into our image, keep track of the flac metadata block that we parsed, the object that we created, and we store it. But we need to visualize it, obviously. So we need to go through each of these individual blocks. The first thing that we're going to do is actually handle the stream info. Let's remind ourselves what's in the stream info. It has a header, obviously, and the data. Stream info header, obviously, just like any other metadata header, keeps track of whether it's the last block in the flac file, what its length, and what its block type is. Not a big deal. We have so we want to be able to actually go ahead and load some of this information. So once this is here, and we've loaded this, we need to define essentially a series of labels and kind of read-only views, and then pack them together in a grid-like structure that will allow us to read some of this information. You could also use, if you remember from our LTK demo, that there are different types of layouts that LTK provides you to use. Just a quick overview of it is they have the list box, they have paned window, and then of course the grid. So we're going to go ahead and I guess maybe use the pane window. Let me see if we did. That would be useful. Let's go ahead and add one more button here. And this is going to be an exit button. And then we will go ahead and from there add our pane window so that we can have a more complete application. LDK button, master new. I think it's going to be something else. Let me add these two. Into application and command this lambda, and then all this guy does is return from main with nil. Okay, so this guy has that, but we can't actually have this, so let's go ahead and make frame first. So in order for us to actually put both of these buttons into a frame, we have to make this into a let star. Now we can define a frame. We'll call this our button frame. I'm using more complete names than we normally would just because, let's take this as a complete application. I will go ahead and post this once we're done on the Atlanta Functional Programming GitHub project page, so folks can review this. So once we have this button frame, we want the button to be part of this frame. So now when we exit, the cleanup is appropriately done. We'll set let's pack our button frame, and then we'll add first our open file button. Let me do this. Okay, and side, it's going to be on the left side with some padding. Let's go ahead and add, just to make it a little cleaner, pad Y is 5. Then let's go ahead and add our exit button, and then we just want it to follow, and then we're going to make a padding perhaps of about maybe 10 so that there's a small space between the two buttons. Then we will go ahead and configure our frame to have a border around it, but we'll not make it singe it, because this is, that's a very motif style way of actually designing the application. So we'll have border width of 3. See this, go ahead, get this done, run our main, see our wish application going in. Just trying to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the chat on the stream. All right, cool. And we'll have this, and you can see that it's starting to come together a little bit. We have 2 buttons, although probably want to have this a little bit closer than just 10, but that's okay. We can go ahead and exit the application. You'll still see our current metadata guy still set to the old instance. As long as you don't set your special variables throughout, it'll always keep track of the previous instance that it was set to. So now let's go ahead and add our initial sections, which is setting up what would be the best way of doing this. Use a sticky. Let's try paint window this time. See if that would be better. Let's see if I can get this working. You know, there's one thing I've been missing here that we may need to add, which is let's see. If I can get this working. Button. Instance. Okay. And let's see. And window. And pained window, there is there's a couple of other things. We have grid, place, style, orientation. Maybe a grid would be easier. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and create it as a grid instead, which is fine because that makes things a little bit fine. Okay. So I'll go ahead and do this. Oops. That's the one I wanted. So now what should we do? We need to add a pane. Let's say a this way. Oops. Does this have a master? Yes, it does. Master. Top frame is going to be the main frame of our application. Oops. Make instance LTK frame. Okay, and we're not going to add any sort of craziness here because it's not needed. Then we'll also have our details frame, which will contain all of our labels that we're going to be displaying for the stream info. Folks who are watching who are noticing that I'll have double quotes every time I hit a quote, it's because Smart Parens mode by default does that. Spacemacs actually corrected that and does some fixes. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to go and update my editing environment because I recently clean installed everything here. So it, eventually I'll get back to that. So now we have some basic details that we may want to add. Let me do something here and go and inspect this guy and see what basic stuff I want to show you guys. Let's go to the parse tree. Here. Metadata. Okay. Go ahead and reopen. Oh, not that. Sorry. Open metadata file. Just want to see how we defined these functions. Okay, so we created those things so that I can only access them with slots. Let's see if I can grab the stream data one. Top level is metadata stream info, but let me see if I can do this. In the block stream, let's see if I access the parse tree. First thing I'll get is block stream, which has the stream info. Okay, so we'll go back to block stream. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the structure on how to retrieve some of this information that we need to display. In order for us to do this, recall that we built this parse tree that is part of a much larger object called block stream that we've also defined. And if we go to block stream, what this block stream data set will keep track of the entire, this is effectively the top level object of our flac file. So we need to grab from the parse tree the stream info, and then from the stream info we'll be able to actually go in and grab our basic information. So let's do this. I'm going to try this on the REPL because sometimes it's useful to do some of this stuff on the REPL. Let's do slots. Let me go ahead and stop this window and go to metadata. I want to look at let's try bits per sample. Bits per sample and min block size, max block size. I think that's a good sample size to make sure that everything is being read in. Then we need to grab from our current metadata the parse tree and then the stream info object from that. So we do stream info of what object? Well, it's the parse tree. Of our current metadata. And now let's just go ahead and dump it. We'll do bits per sample, min block size, and max block size. And then we'll just specify that bits per sample, min block size, max block size. And did I mess something up here? The slot bits per sample is missing from the object, so I must have typed it in wrong. Bits per sample goes into stream info. Here, bits per sample should be the stream info object. Oh, right. I have to go grab the metadata block data of that, don't I? All right. Okay. Let me go back to this. Go up. How do I grab? And okay, got it. So here, we need to add one more thing, which is metadata block data. And we've essentially constructed what we need to grab from this thing. So we need to go ahead and we can actually go ahead and visualize this now. So one thing that we could do is once we load it, we need to first do our layouts, and then we need to set up the text. With our time remaining is I'm going to go ahead and add the basic layout, which is our labels and everything set up. The next time I'm going to go ahead and populate this so that this way you have this read-only view of all the stream information. This two-step meal will make it easier for folks to watch this in succession and then be able to go through it. A lot of this is just a lot of boilerplate. We may revisit this to see how we could possibly clean this up to do better layouts ourselves, maybe write a few macros for it. But for right now, we're just going to go ahead and use the library as they are. So let me go ahead and create a stream info title because I want this to be a title. Second, go ahead and do this one thing before I do this. Before I start. And while I'm doing this, if anybody has questions, feel free and ask away. This way, it'll keep the conversation going while you guys are watching me hack this code in. So let's see here. We need to pack the top frame, which holds our things, and then we need to pack the details of this, and then obviously we need to also pack in our details frame. And packing is just basically, again, LTK's way of setting up the geometry for and setting up the window size for everything. Let's see how this works so far. Did I spell something wrong? I did. Going. Let's go and check. We still have our things set up good. Let me actually do something here. Make this a little interesting. When we open up, when we run open file, let's go ahead and return the file name. So this way we could actually have it inside of our window title, shall we? So this way, it makes it easier for us to know that we're changing between files. Alright, so now here we're going to change this ever so slightly. We're going to change this to be a lambda function again. But this time, what this is doing is instead of calling flac file, what it does is it sets up our, wait, how did we do this? It calls, sorry, LTK, wait, WM title on our bool's bound variable, And this does a setup essentially. Flac metadata viewer, and we need to actually go ahead and create the string for this. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in a. Hold on one second. Just expand my buffer here slightly. Format nil tilde a, and it will return what was provided by open flac file. All right, let's see if this works. And we go to wish, open flac file, and if we specify UC.
Question.
Yeah, sure.
What about the original WM title that you had before?
It will get overwritten.
They have it lower down?
Huh?
Oh, sorry. Okay, no worries.
So if you see here, it gives me the entire name, the path name. If I switch to a different file here, now it's just loading it up the way it's kind of expecting it to. Does that make sense? So it's that WM title is always is modifiable now. We can actually go and adjust it in the window handle.
Gotcha.
This makes it a little easier for us to switch between files, and we know which file we're working with. So rather than us constantly looking back at current metadata, right? This would be a little bit easier. Let's do this now. Now we have that kind of working, and we can get our setup in for the basic stream info stuff. So stream info section title. And I'm going to say up front that a lot of this is going to be us tweaking it after we get the initial layout, because it's a bit of a pain to actually set up some of this stuff. This is all standard UI development that I'm sure most of you have done at some point. So give me just 1 second. I just need to get the label properties correctly. Oh wait, sorry. Make instance LTK label, and our master is going to be details pane. Our text is going to be information. And let's see here, padding, let's go ahead. Underline, let's see what that is. I've never actually seen that before. Okay. Let's see this. Let's see how well this is going to be set up. So now, LTK pack info section title. anchor left, and this should be fine for now. Let's see what happens. Set this up. Ooh, okay, good. Exit. Okay, so that's our integer. Maybe. Let me take this guy out because this looks like it's giving me more trouble than it should be. Because I'm trying. Let's see here. What is it complaining about? Main root call the TK. Locals. With service condition. Verify event. Why is it trying to verify event? Interesting. Let me see if something has changed here. Weird. Looks like the anchor has changed. Yeah, it's really weird. So anchor shows up, but it doesn't like the Give me 1 second. I think this is associated with TK's padding anchor rules for frames. What is nope. Let's see here. I must have forgotten something here. Let me see something here. Which side? Let's take these guys off and do the defaults because I really want it to be on the left-hand side. Still showing up in the middle. Okay, I'll go ahead and keep going on, and then as I add more and more to it, we'll see what happens. I want this to be in a paned window though, because then we can add panes. I'm going to make a paned window. Details, pane, instead of this frame. Okay, paned window. Since we're kind of doing kind of the setting up before we actually do the display, it might be just useful to try this out. Nice. See if anchors works on the panes to the frames. Anchor left. Nope. Doesn't like it. Alright. I have to go and figure that out. Okay, let's see here. We have a master, we have a frame, we have instructions on its title. We're going to go ahead and add. We're just going to add those three ones that we've defined. Bits per sample table. This might be easier on a grid, but we will see. DK grid. Let's do that. DK grid. Button frame. I'm changing up the layout here as we're going through here. Button frame. 0, 0, just because it looks like it might be easier just to define this one at a time this way. Sticky is, and if I remember correctly, on the layouts, let me just go to the grid. Grid layout. Canvas. Screen functions. Got it. So what we need to do is going to be sticky's going to be in the north direction. Actually, you know what? I'll take this back. We don't need to do this. we could do this. This is fine. My apologies, folks. I forgot that anchor specifies a direction that you need to use in the north-south center sort of thing. So let's do east. Yes, I know it's defined in what I used. This here is not actually side. Yes. We're gonna have to use grid layout, sadly. I was hoping not to use this because grid layouts are a little bit more complicated. Let's do this. Safety is going to be north. Row span is going to be, let's say, 4. And then column span is going to be 1. Okay. Let's do this. And if we use grid, we don't need pack. I don't think we need any of these. Let's start again. Okay. Let me change a couple of things here. Let's see here. This changes things a little bit. No, it's not actually changing that. Contains these 2 buttons. So why is it not showing? Weird. I'll deal with the layout later. Let's get all these labels in. I'm going to make this guy into a text box just to make things a little bit more simpler. well, just to add a little variety to our application. Text, I think is what it is. Yeah. That text. Master is going to be details pane. Just make sure that there's a read only. So I really don't want. As you can see with this one, there's quite a few options, but I'm trying to basically just give it a very simple one, which is that it doesn't have to allow adjustments. Sure that I'm not missing anything here. Block size label. Details pane. Text. And block size. Max block size label. Okay. So let's do this. And we'll go ahead and add. Got one more. So this guy's gonna be it's simple label. Minimum font size label. Oops. And maximum font size. Now, if you guys are wondering, I'm just kind of like sketching out what we're going to be displaying here. 1 second, sorry. And I'm just trying to set everything up so that when we actually set up our application next week, we'll be all good. And clearly, there is some layout issues that I'm going to be having to deal with. I will go ahead and fix some of these issues right now, and then check this in, and then give you guys some review to next week on this, because it looks like we're going well over time. But as you can see, right now we're just kind of tweaking up our application, setting up, kind of doing some of the layouts and stuff. And obviously, this is a lot of trial and error to actually get kind of right. I'll fix up some of these basic ones and show you what I've done, and then check this in. But kind of ran out of time here. I was hoping to get to the actual reading part, but we've already kind of seen that with what I've shown you in the REPL as to what we're about to display and how we're accessing this information. So next week we'll finish this up, and ideally, my hope is we could start getting to, like, once we have this application next week, how do we handle, compiling it and doing like distribution. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Have a good weekend, and thank you for joining.